Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Valley of the Judged. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me, I have one newcomer and one returning good brother. First off, we have the man who recently conquered the Dark Ages and is now on to laugh at the Green X in a few days. Good brother Sig.
Oh, what a wild ride that was, but man, I'm glad I took it.
And making her debut in the valley, the one who has realized that permadeath is real when it comes to Growlancer. Good sister Tabby.
Yes, Karen is dead, and it makes me sad. Next time, she will not die on my next playthrough.
Were you opposite of a table from me, I would hand you a handkerchief and say, pretend you're French.
Well, you know.
And I know some
It
might
is what
say,
it is.
isn't it cruel to keep doing the French surrender jokes? To that I say, I grew up with Star Trek TNG, and I grew up with Picard surrendering a lot, especially in the first season. It's not a stereotype if it keeps happening.
You're not wrong.
I rarely am, and yet
He did
people are
surrender
always
a lot.
surprised by it.
I don't even ask questions anymore.
No.
But we're back once again, coming off of the heels of Fang Night, and me ranting a great deal about that one page.
Mm-hmm.
And in some circles, I've seen some people try to defend that page.
Ridiculous.
To which I have simply said, it's a free country and you are free to be wrong.
I mean, that's always the solution, isn't it?
Yeah. I've had to say that to a dear friend of mine because he has the gall to put ketchup on steak.
That is a sacrilege.
That's gross.
Him and I are going to have a discussion.
You don't put ketchup on steak.
Yeah.
It's a good thing he's not a guest in the Wanderer's Library, otherwise he would get a very stern talking to.
Oh, no doubt. But with that said, as it's tradition, it is time for us to do the one-shot before we get into the next season. And next season's going to be interesting. But
Yeah, like I said, I can't wait for that one. That
Yep.
That one looks really cool.
now, originally I had planned on something else for the one-shot, but I kind of underestimated the page count and the density, so I had to call an audible. Now, fortunately, with both of the games that we're covering, they are technically not out yet, which is something that does happen. Which Tabby is why I was a bit incredulous when you were like, I don't know anything about these games.
I don't.
Two things. One, when you're in the monastery, you're going to be learning about a lot of different games. And two, if we only covered games that we just knew, then there'd be no point. I would be yet another D&D channel, and I've made clear I have no desire to do that.
That's
Which is
understandable.
why I feel like I'm in the right place in the monastery, because I like exploring the unknown.
But with that said, we're going to be covering 2 quick starts today. The first of these is Wandering Blades, which of course I was going to cover this because I love delving into wuxia. That's certainly nothing new. And the second one I've technically talked about in the past, but it was about a year ago. And since its Quickstart has recently been updated, I figured now's a good time to talk about it. That being Oathhammer, which is developed by the same guy who did Streets of Peril. And full disclosure, I did back both of these games on Kickstarter, and at least one of them I have done an interview on. I never heard back as far as doing an interview for Wandering Blades, but for Oathhammer, I did. Yeah, that would be Kyle Griswold, who I interviewed for Oathhammer and for its predecessor, Streets of Peril, which originally Streets of Peril was going to be a heavily modified 5e game. Then you know what happened.
Yep.
I know I keep bringing that up every single time, but I feel like I feel like for years to come, that is going to be my equivalent to Civi bringing up Half-Life.
So an evergreen joke, pretty much?
Yes.
I mean, that is exactly what D&D is at this point. So.
That's not what I'm getting at. It's more to do with the. I've told the story to Sig, but I may as well bring you up to speed, Tabby. I'm referring to the OGL fiasco from around 2 years ago.
I figured about that. That's when we all pretty much were like, okay, well, let's figure something else out, and yeah.
Meanwhile, I had been warning from the high heavens that something was going to go down because the way things were going wasn't sustainable, so Monkstradamus strikes again.
Kind of wish I had met you sooner then.
It's not like I have a crystal ball or anything. I just was looking at the direction things were going, and I'm like, this is not going to be sustainable, and something is going to go down.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I didn't think causing a massive shitstorm to the point where the lawyers got involved would be what ended up happening, but that's how it go. So, anyway, Wandering Blades, which is describing itself as an OSR adjacent wuxia. I am not going to be entertaining the discussion of how OSR it is, because I've made very clear my disdain for large swaths of the OSR, and the fact that they don't care much for me either. But I do want to point out some of the sources of inspiration that were mentioned. See, Flesh and Blood, I'm familiar with that. It is alright. Runecairn is pretty good. Errant, I think I've talked about that in the past. Vaults of Vom, I'm not familiar with. The Black Hack, obviously, I'm very familiar with that. Black Hack is really good. Sharp Swords and Sinister Spells, good game, shit creator.
Yeah, I know. I've heard a thing or two about Diogo. I heard he's not very nice.
Well, he threw me and Zan under the bus. If it weren't for him getting triggered, everyone would have seen the time we were on a podcast with him.
Yeah.
Let's see. Sword World 2.5. I am very familiar with Sword World.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you were the one that kind of got me into it and got me looking through all the books.
Mm-hmm. See,
He keeps linking me things about Sword World. Like, It's a weekly basis at this point. I get a random video. Go watch this right now. I'm like, dude, I'm at work. I don't care. Watch it right now.
Uh, I know that
Blame Wardrobe.
the most recent Sword World video had to do with the fact that Aquid wanted to correct the record because one video that got a lot of traction put this idea that Lodos was the cocoon that led to Sword World. That's not the case. They were both developed at the same time. They just had different design goals early on. Eventually, Lodos would get folded into Sword World, but that was because by the time we get to the mid to late 90s, TTRPGs in Japan were losing ground to TCGs. But Sword World still had a dedicated following, so they're like, let's just fold Lodos into Sword World. But Coriolis, the Third Horizon, I reviewed that game a couple years ago. Free League does not know how to miss. And Avatar Legends, I haven't reviewed the full game, but Zan and I have talked about the Quickstart a while back, as well as talked about an interview. I have brought up the fact that Avatar Legends and the Power Rangers RPG failed, in my opinion, for the same, and oddly enough, failed for the same reason. And this may sound a bit odd, but the reason why I consider both of them to have failed was they were more focused on emulating the TV show rather than the world the TV show takes place in. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yep, not seeing the forest for the trees, pretty much.
I've seen some people try and say, oh, it failed because it used Powered by the Apocalypse. No, that wasn't the problem. Because Legend of the Elements uses PBTA, and it's actually good. Oh, no, the problem was that, as well as a dumbass reason why avatars are not playable, or why you can't have an avatar as a PC. Their reasoning was some things should remain mysterious.
But there's no mystery to it, so that doesn't make any sense.
It also doesn't make any sense because you know what game did have an avatar equivalent, even if it was in the GM section? Legend of the Elements.
Mm-hmm.
Second Age also has a playable avatar. So anyone saying, it can't be done in a TTRPG? Bullshit. It's been done 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
At least. But then we get into inspirations of digital and print media, the Condor trilogy, Yaoren, Blades of the Guardians, Blood and Steel, and Under One Person. I'm familiar with each of these. They're good picks. Then for film and television, we have The Assassin, Reign of Assassins, Sword of the Stranger. If you have not seen Sword of the Stranger, fix that.
Putting that on my list.
Yep. Seven Swords, also very good. Hero, damn good.
I love Hero. Hero was exquisite.
Mm-hmm. Even had a graphic novel by the same guy who did the Storm Riders.
Nice.
Though he changed the ending a little bit. I don't mind it. The main thing that changed was the fact that Sky and Hero actually lived. Let's see, Samurai Champloo, Last Hurrah for Chivalry, and Come Drink with Me. All good
Samurai
stuff.
Champloo's fun.
R.I.P. Nujabes. Nujabes was the guy who did a lot of the soundtrack for Champloo, and he passed away several years ago.
Oh wow!
No, that's sad.
As far as video games, Ghost of Tsushima, Sekiro,
I haven't played that one.
Wolong, and Phantom Blade Zero. Wait, that's out? I thought that hadn't come out yet. Also, I thought Phantom Blade was from the S game crew, not Cruel Man Studio.
I'll have to search that.
Yeah, let me.
Phantom Blade, no, it says it was published May 24, 2023. That's what it says, anyway.
That's news to me. I was...
Oh, never mind. It's a showcase. It was on a showcase.
Yeah. Oh. So I checked. The game's not slated for release until fall of 2026. Which, okay, that makes sense. It is a bit odd to list that as an inspiration, to list a game that isn't even out yet for inspiration, so I was thrown off. Plus, the developer of Phantom Blade Zero is S Game, so I'm not sure where the Cruel Man Studio came in. And unless they're talking about publisher, but that's not the case with any of the other ones. But anyway, we have a nice little table of contents. Let me check no bookmarks, but this is a quick start, so I'm not making too much of a fuss on that. So then we get into what is Wandering Blades. It is a wuxia RPG. I've stated elsewhere that wuxia is a genre that everybody's seen even if they don't know it. In the sense that a lot of people have seen a wuxia film but don't know the terminology of the genre. Now, as far as them saying success in combat relies on skill instead of luck, I'm always reminded of when OSR folk talk about player skill versus character skill, and I'm sitting here going, that's an easy way to fall into elitism if left unchecked. But then it goes into what is wuxia. Now I do want to read off what it says, because wuxia, again, is a genre that a lot of people either don't know or misunderstand. This wuxia, literally martial heroes, is a genre of Chinese fiction about the adventures of martial artists capable of achieving seemingly supernatural fighting abilities. This genre is often viewed as low fantasy, as it doesn't typically feature any magic. Yes and no. I think I've talked with you about this in the past, but something that a lot of people have to get used to really quickly when dealing with media across East Asia, whether it be anime, whether it be wuxia or whatnot, is this idea of a divide between martial and magical.
Exactly.
What would be considered magic in a Western fantasy setting in a wuxia story would just be another form of kung fu.
Mm-hmm.
The magic in a lot of wuxia stories is in the more ritualistic affairs, or in the more. There are these supernatural elements, especially with certain types of exorcists and the like. I'm vastly simplifying the matter, but the problem is that what a lot of people consider as magic in a Western fantasy setting, you bring that over into wuxia, it's just another form of ki. Like, look, even if you were to look at certain anime that lean into fantasy, the line is kind of blurred. Even with something where you'd say, okay, that's basically D&D anime in the form of, say, Lodos. A lot of the character setups in Lodos, by the time we get to the novel form of Lodos, you could you really do that in D&D? Not really.
No. Much in the same way you couldn't do stuff like from Tower of Doom or Shadows of Mystara in actual D&D. Because there's a lot there that isn't in the actual books.
Yeah, because Tower of Doom and Shadows of Mystara were made by people who actually wanted to make every class fun instead of putting a bunch of bullshit catches. Yes, I will always be salty about that, about game balance arguments being used selectively. But, and of course, that applies just as much to their spiritual successor in Dragon's Crown.
Mm-hmm.
But, see,
fun game, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Fun game, and as a bit of an art student, going through the art with Dragon's Crown is a bit of a scavenger hunt. But then it goes into what is a TTRPG, and then what materials do you need, and then we get into character creation. I do like that we have these steps laid out in this column here.
Nice little flow chart.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping things rather simple.
Yep. The first is your class. It says there are 3 core classes, but we only see 2 here. Yosha and Outlaw. Yosha would be considered a typical martial arts hero, whereas Outlaw would be somebody who would be the more underhanded approach. Though I have a feeling that calling these classes is going to be a bit of a misnomer. I have a feeling they're going to feel more like archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
But then we have techniques. Each character possesses a number of martial arts techniques they have mastered by virtue of their class. In order to use them in battle, a PC must spend the required key points. New techniques are learned when a new level is reached. There are 3 types. Combat, which require an action. Reactive, which require a reaction. And support, which require an action in combat. Then we have the attributes, which are going to be strength, agility, focus, and intellect. And for determining attribute, it's you're rolling 46 straight instead of 46 and drop the lowest.
And put them wherever you want.
Yep. And you're putting each die roll to a different attribute, thus determining its attribute bonus. The score is determined by adding the bonus to a base of 10. Attribute bonuses cannot exceed 9. That's a interesting way to generate ability scores, I suppose. It's kind of on an inverse to how this sort of thing usually is set up. I do wonder how much of a factor the score is going to apply. But then we have HP, standard fare. Your starting HP is equal to the maximum value of your class's hit die. When you gain a new level, you roll the class's hit die and add the result to max. So standard fare there. I usually end up house ruling hit die as you're always treated as rolling max. If only because I've dealt with wizards who roll hit die and they're like, oh good, I leveled up. I gain 1 HP.
Can't tell you how many times that happened.
Level 35 character with 135 HP. Not in my campaign.
Oh.
That really happened.
But then we have key points, which is equal to your focus bonus plus any key points provided by your chosen class. The approach that they have with the attributes is strength can determine carrying capacity, how hard you hit, and performing physical feats. Agility determines dodging, finesse, or weapons that require finesse, and performing dexterity tasks. Focus is a factor when it comes to ki, and intellect is a factor when it comes to creative solutions to problems. But then we have carrying capacity, which is equal to your strength score, and is measured in item slots. I am glad that we're seeing games more and more veer away from measuring individual items by weight, because that sort of realism ends up creating more problems than it solves.
Because money is heavy.
I'm not going into just that, but also things like a claymore weighing much less than it should.
Or carrying like a dozen plus weapons and barely slowing down.
Putting aside the fact that I'm not a big fan of encumbrance as a rule anyways.
Neither am I.
If you refer to things with item slots, I think it's a lot easier for people to grasp than having them math up how many pounds they can carry. But then we have exploration speed, which is equal to your strength score in miles. That it determines how far you can travel outside of combat. This can be affected by difficult terrain, i.e. half exploration speed, and harsh terrain, 1/4 exploration speed. And then your equipment. Each PC starts with a unique equipment kit that contains several items essential to their class. Additionally, you may have starting currency that can use to be purchased weapons, armor, and other items. Interesting that they go with armor, because you look at a lot of wuxia heroes, and armor's not really a big thing.
Especially considering there are a lot of techniques, at least in the movies I've seen, where just one punch can break armor.
See, but then you have drive, basically a inner motivation. Once per session, you can tap into that drive to automatically succeed on a single check or save, even if the roll initially failed. You also have a keepsake. This is an item that can't be used in combat, does not take up an item slot, but is likely tied to your drive. Then you have connection. Basically an important relationship you have with another member of the party or a key NPC. This connection can be used for the GM to create roleplay opportunities. Because remember, family for a player is character background, and for a GM, character blackmail.
Oh, I know. I can definitely tell you how many times certain people in this chat room, in this channel right now, have used my family to my detriment.
But then you have reputation, which is meant to represent the impact on the world around you. This is guided by 3 reputation scores. Martial, i.e. your rep within the martial world. Court, self-explanatory, and common, your reputation among ordinary people. You have 3 reputation scores. One of them gets 2, one of them gets 3, one of them gets 4. So unfriendly, neutral, and friendly. So then we have the classes proper. The first being the Yoshia. I know somebody's gonna bitch at me about my pronunciation of Chinese. To that I say, if you're mad at me, leave a comment, but leave it in Mandarin.
And also, don't leave a comment.
But we have the first 5 levels. I'm hoping that there's going to be more than 5 in the full book. The total bonus key points and signature weapons, which we'll get to in a moment. So first is their adventurer set, 2 item slots, which has what they start with. Their hit die is 1d10. They start with 150 coins. But you are part of a martial arts sect. Your connection to that sect means you always have a home to return to. Your signature weapon deals damage one step higher, and the number of signature weapons you can possess is dependent on level. You also have a disguise, persona, or identity that lets you blend into certain areas. But if you're discovered, you can't use that identity again until a long rest. And then the Yosha techniques. You start with 2 general techniques and 1 from your chosen sect. When you gain a new level, you may add 1 general technique or 1 from your chosen sect. So then we have the general techniques here. And then a couple of sect techniques. Though it looks like each one has a certain ability that's unique to that sect. Like the Mountain Orchid has it that once per encounter, as a free move action, you may reposition to an adjacent engagement zone, i.e. from close to mid-range. Whereas the Vagabond sect, once per encounter, you may switch from a slow turn to a fast turn or vice versa after all turns have been declared. We'll probably get a better understanding of that when we get to combat. But for all intents and purposes, the Vagabond sect is the beggar sect in all but name. Which, although the only thing that kind of goes against that is that there is techniques like cutting grip. Mostly, and the whole killing opponent thing, because the beggar sect likes using sticks, not swords. Then we have a couple more with the Iron Mountain sect and the Floating Lotus sect.
Iron Mountain sounds like it's in my wheelhouse.
It is definitely a very wrestling-focused approach.
I'm kind of torn between the Mountain Orchid and the Floating Lotus.
But then we have the Outlaw class, which does get bonus key points, but not as many as the Yoshia. But it also gets talent points as well as notoriety. So with notoriety, you can add a die to a related check equal to that during certain NPC interactions. This can be done a number of times per long rest equal to your intellect bonus. Additionally, encounter rolls made in situations involving NPCs who would reasonably know your exploits are made using 3d6. And we have Ear to the Ground, where by spending an hour in a gathering place, you can collect rumors a number of times per long rest equal to your focus bonus. When you do this, roll 1d6. If the result is lower than your focus bonus, the GM provides you with a valuable piece of information pertaining to local events, or hidden treasures, or secrets. Then Outlaw talents. Starting at level 1, you can spend a talent point to become trained in a skill set. Another may be spent on a trained skill to become an expert, and another to become a master. Talent points must be spent when an outlaw advances, i.e. levels up. So the outlaw is our skill monkey, is our rogue.
Reading over the description of the outlaw, I was like, Aratani, is that you?
And we have
I mean, it makes sense.
Yep. We have a short list of several skills, which have different benefits at trained, expert, and master. And then we have outlaw techniques. So they do have techniques, but nowhere near as many as the Yoshia. Let's see, then we have equipment.
Aratani, by the way, would be more like a mixture because she would use more key focused. I would believe so. This one didn't look as key focused,
Oh,
but I might be wrong. I might be
well,
just glancing over it too quickly.
remember what I said earlier about the line between martial and mage not being
Yeah.
clear cut. So bringing in a character like that into this is not good. It's a different approach. But let's see. Then we have our weapon list, which is a pretty standard looking one. And when it
If
comes,
I remember correctly, Gions are the straight swords, right?
yes.
Yeah.
But much like what we saw with Fang Knight, we have broader zones rather than hard and fast 5-foot squares. With the GM's discretion about what counts as close range, mid range, and long range. And a move action is just moving one range category. But see, then we have the special features of different weapons, which is always going to be nice. Though I do have to say, because of that setup, the idea of I'm starting to notice one problem that's a bit of a nitpick on my end, and I'm going to scroll back to the Yoshia to illustrate this. The whole signature weapons thing with Yoshia, that I realize that that's basically what you'd expect of, say, a fighter.
Mhm.
But when you look at a lot of the wandering hero characters in a lot of wuxia, they usually stick to one kind of weapon and that's it.
Yep.
Like somebody who's seen using a Jian, that's the weapon that they're going to stick with. So I do hope the full book has some kind of option for people who want to focus on one particular weapon instead of a bunch of signatures. Especially since, and this is something I tried to address with the fighter job in Legend Edition, the way people equip their characters, they're not really going to be focused on wielding a bunch of weapons. A lot of them are going to stick to one particular way they equip their character and largely stick to it. Especially since switching weapons in a lot of games is such an action drain that it's not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
But then we have a similar thing with armor. Armor, in this case, is damage reduction instead of adding to your dodge, thank God. I'm not a big fan of the adding to dodge with heavier armor.
Like the AC type thing?
Yeah.
So I never really think about it that way. I think that when it comes to heavier armor adding more AC, it's more of like with heavy armor, I feel like they just hit and it doesn't do damage, versus like maybe with a barbarian or a monk being more like dodging. But with like a heavy armor, it's like more just you hit the thing and it just kind of chinks, if you get maybe drift on it.
I understand where you're coming from, but question. Have you ever worn plate?
I haven't, but I know it's real heavy. Very heavy.
Consider for a moment the fact that even if you get shot wearing Kevlar, you can still come out of that with broken ribs.
Yes. Yeah, I get that too, but I'm kind of thinking about it from other games' point of view, like other games that I've played, even of like that's not necessarily they're not dodging, but it's like you can literally hear the ping, you know, so it's not like deadly damage, basically. So even with Kevlar, yes, you can break a rib, but it's not deadly damage. If you will get like broken ribs are deadly, but you get my meaning. It's like it kind of mitigates it from being damage that's deadly versus damage that's not. That's the only thing I got.
I can hear the stretching so much that I can portion is envious.
Oh goodness.
But one of the special features for armor is guard, basically an action that lets you spend a reaction to completely nullify incoming damage a number of times equal to the value associated with the item, i.e. a shield with guard 3 can do this 3 times per encounter. When all of an item's guard is spent during an encounter, you can sacrifice the item for one final guard attempt. This results in the destruction of the item and you receiving a condition of the GM's choice. And then we have general equipment, which a lot of it is what one might expect.
Cooking kit, that is my wheelhouse.
A cost of living table, fair stuff. Then we get into the basic mechanics. So standard check is a d20 plus attribute with a few difficulty scores that again are standard. Now, if you rolling a natural 20, that's a critical. Rolling natural 1, that's a fumble. If a roll is amplified, you get a +5 bonus. If a roll is hindered, you get a -5 penalty. This cannot be applied multiple times to a single roll. If both are applied, they cancel each other out. They also have the clock system that we've seen in Powered by the Apocalypse as well. Which, interesting. Then we get into combat mechanics. And it looks like instead of rolling for initiative, you decide, okay, you're either doing a fast turn or you're doing a slow turn. Fast turns happen first. You can take one action and one reaction. Slow turns happen last. You can take 2 actions and 1 reaction.
That is interesting.
It's not far removed from the action economy that you see in things like Shadow of the Demon Lord, where instead of rolling for initiative, everybody's determining, okay, I'm either acting fast or slow. You have something kind of like this in Against the Dark Master as well. But first, when it comes to actions, we have movement, which can be used as you would expect, repositioning, or you can use it to assume a stance, which grants bonuses and penalties. These persist until an action is spent to move or switch stances. So a defensive stance, you get +2 dodge and -2 attack. A aggressive stance, you get +2 damage and -2 dodge. Or a balanced stance, +1 dodge and +1 attack. And then we have the attack action itself. It is d20 plus strength or agility, their choice, versus dodge. The defender can use a reaction if they wish to, which gets resolved first. Then resolve damage. Roll damage dice to the attacker's weapon, deduct damage value from HP, account for damage reduction, mark wounds, and apply conditions if called for. Now let's see how they handle dual wielding. If you have 2 one-handed weapons, you can roll damage for each weapon and select the highest result. Okay, not nice. We have a dual wielding that isn't penalizing you until you do a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah, or doesn't reduce your damage on your offhand weapon by a certain amount.
That's very handy, considering I have a lot of characters that dual wield, and it just becomes not even worth it in other games.
And for unarmed attacks, you can do 2 unarmed attack actions that each do 1d2 damage. I do hope that there are techniques or the like that can increase that.
Mhm.
You can also use improvised weapons, which, unless stated otherwise, the attack roll is hindered. Let's see, then you can also use techniques. You also have special maneuvers, such as aim. Spend an action to prepare a ranged attack. If your next attack action succeeds, add 1 additional damage die. This cannot be used alongside the swift weapon feature. Or you can feint. Roll an intellect check against the difficulty equal to the target's intellect score. On a successful roll, your next attack is amplified. And grappling. This is an opposed strength or agility check. You can disarm, force them to drop an equipped weapon. Push/throw, move them 1 zone away. If the attacker loses, the next attack or maneuver against them by the defender is amplified. Or trip. Which, prone gets you home.
Yep.
You also have a few universal ways to use ki. And I think one of the things I'm curious about is if it's easy to get ki back. Otherwise, this could end up with a too good to use situation. But as far as reactions, you have parry, which is a strength or agility, which is basically attack versus attack. And if the result is equal or higher, the attack fails, and the defender resolves damage against the attack without having to take an attack action. So more or less the same thing I did with parry in my system. Let's see, counter. If a melee attack misses, you can make a free attack action against the attacker. Deflect. You can try to deflect or catch an incoming projectile.
So try put on your breast Kenshiro impression.
Withdraw, so run away. Guard, as mentioned before, and bind if an oncoming enemy attack misses. You can initiate a bind by making a strength or agility check. If the defender wins, both of the combatant's weapons are locked together. On each character's turn, they make an opposed strength or agility check to withdraw, counter, or disarm their opponent. While bound, attack actions against both combatants are amplified and they cannot attack.
How does that make sense? If your weapons are locked together, it's basically a giant game of tug of war, or who can disarm the other person first.
I think it's more that if they're bound while they're up against each other, they're locked with each other, which does mean they'd be completely open to ranged attacks against them. But then we have morale. In combat, a morale roll is triggered when more than half the NPCs have been killed, if the boss or sub-boss is defeated, or at the GM's discretion. NPCs will have a morale score between 2 and 12. The GM rolls 2d6 and compares the result to an NPC's morale score. If the result is higher, then they'll attempt to retreat, surrender, or negotiate on the next turn.
So, Dynasty Warriors.
Then we have wounds and conditions. Any damage beyond 0 hit points results in a wound. For every 5 wounds, you receive a condition. though you can get other conditions through certain techniques and certain scenarios. A NPC follower is instantly killed or knocked out when they are reduced to 0 HP. So hit points and key points, according to the resting rules, are replenished between rests. A short rest gives you a single hit die's worth of HP. This takes an hour. A long rest fully restores hit points and key points, as well as removing any non-permanent conditions. This is your 8-hour rest. And a full rest is 7 days. Get the effects of a long rest and remove all long-term conditions. So if it takes a long rest to get key back, then I'm afraid that we're back to the whole 8 hours to get your spells back situation, which I'm not sure that's a good idea for this kind of game.
It wouldn't sound like it. It would be like a short rest should get your key back, in my opinion, because that makes it so that you can actually use your things rather than have to, okay, well, now I'm going to wait for the boss.
Yeah.
So that's not fun for anyone, because like you'd rather be able to use your shit rather than just being like, okay, well, never mind.
Well, it creates the too good to use problem. Where people want to get weight. When you give people a limited resource that has a certain level of punishment, there's the temptation to be as conservative as possible with it. This is what results in what H.C. Bailey calls too good to use, and what I've called the 99 Megalixirs paradox.
You're not wrong. I ended up, because I didn't want my monk to feel like he couldn't use his stuff. He had an ability that literally recharged at like, God, I think it was like short rest or some crap, and would basically allow him to just refill half his key like 3 times before short rest, and it was insane because I was like, you can use your stuff as much as you want. I don't want to minimize what you can and can't do. That's it. Yeah.
I understand limiting certain abilities, but you can go too far with that.
Yeah.
Now, if you're dealing with a low fantasy affair, I'm a little more forgiving towards the whole limited resource thing. But Wuxia is not that kind of low fantasy or high grit sort of approach. That is only if it wants to be. Because the thing about Wuxia is there's a lot of variety within the genre. You have the more fantastical stuff like Wind and Cloud / the Storm Riders, but at the same time you have more grounded or even darker affairs like Heroes Shed No Tears. And even something like Rainblood Town of Death was noir-esque wuxia. And I feel like this is a problem. It's very clear that they are using a lot of quote-unquote old school stuff in the mechanics. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that was the right call to go that far with it, because what you end up having feels less like a wuxia game and more like a Chinese black hack. Actually, that's not fair. That's not fair because the black hack knows how to go over the top. A Chinese ostrich. I think that's closer to the mark. Or trying to take, as much as I enjoy elements of Castles and Crusades, imagine trying to take that and go wuxia with it. But not changing a lot of the core mechanics. It's kind of like that. After a example of combat, we get into encounters and exploration, going into NPCs and adversaries as well as the different types, and a few sample adversaries. I do hope that the full book has some sort of adversary creation system instead of a bestiary, because a lot of adversaries in a wuxia are going to be human. You're not going to be dealing with non-human enemies all that much.
Yeah, unless you go into the more fantastical aspects of it, like stuff with the Monkey King and whatnot.
Yeah, which I've mentioned before is more of a tianxia than a wuxia. But let's see, then they get into character advancement with a yes or no that grants 1 XP for each yes. When you get 5 XP, you increase your level and can gain the class features associated, a new technique, an increase to max HP. You can optionally shift a connection and modify drive, and at every even level, a attribute can be improved by +1 to a maximum of +9. And they revisit the reputations course thing that we mentioned previously, and how that score can work with a score from 1 to 6. Then we get into overland travel and a travel table, which utilizes your intellect bonus and a D20. Then some GM advice on running the thing. And a sample adventure called A Heavenly Treasure, which is a 2-session affair, and I'm skipping most of that because I always skip modules in these kind of things. And then a quick reference, and finally the character sheet. If I'm being honest, I understand wanting to make it feel like an old school RPG, but I wonder if they played a little too close on that. This feels too much like an OSR game and not enough like a wuxia game.
Yeah, it doesn't really. I mean, I can see where they tried, certainly.
But I think the problem here is sticking too close to the OSR mindset, and this is unfortunately a problem I see a lot with games that want to experiment with the OSR mindset but don't want to fully modify the setup too much. It results in a kind of no man's land.
But this is a playtest, so, I mean, certain things might change.
But also, they talk about skillful play and wanting people to feel stylish, but I don't see where that would manifest. At least give me a stunt bonus or something like that. I'm just not seeing the stylish. I'm not seeing the wuxia in this affair. Especially when I compare it to other wuxia TTRPGs. I'm not quite seeing it. I did back the thing, so maybe I'll revisit this when the full book comes out. But right now, I'm like, I don't see a wuxia game. I see an OSR game and a wuxia coat of paint.
And like I said at the beginning, before we started this, it's like Daniel Kwan. I feel like I've seen that name somewhere, but I cannot for the life of me think of where.
But anyway, the next one we've got is Oathhammer. Oathhammer is using Cal Griswold's Perilous D6 system. So break out the 6-sided dice because we're gonna be going with that, though nowhere near as many 6-sided dice as we did with Shadowrun. And yes, as you can
build up lots of dice pools and whatnot.
Yeah. And yes, as you can kind of see from the cover, dwarves.
Gotta represent the short kings after all. I like how that one in at the top there has a hammer of thunderbolts.
Mm-hmm. So it's not all dwarves, but the central premise is your adventure is going to reclaim dwarf holds. And this also does not have bookmarks in the PDF, but we do have. But it is pretty self-explanatory what's what. I do like that they make that the opening page makes clear that you are heroes that embody virtue. It's a minor thing, but it's basically if you want your Shades of Grey shit, go over to Streets of Peril or go over to Warhammer Fantasy. Here we play heroes doing heroic shit. Not to dismiss Warhammer Fantasy or anything like that, but I like when that's made clear because there's always going to be that one person who wants to claim that they're playing morally gray just so that they can do bad shit without any consequences. You know, the chaotic neutral player.
Mm-hmm. Or like every evil player character ever, at least from the RPG horror stories that I've read.
You gotta play these characters. You gotta give chaotic neutral, credit that they're due whenever they are playing it right. Because usually, those of us who have played chaotic neutral, we don't just do bad things just to do bad things.
Have you ever heard the expression "one bad apple spoils the bunch"?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Or I suppose a better term would be the term from TV tropes. Everybody remembers the stripper.
Mm-hmm.
But then they get in a. But it says right at this front. You and your allies have been charged with restoring Osric Isle to the dwarven people who once called it home. So we already have a reason for adventuring, which solves one of the early problems. But you are going to be rolling a dice pool most of the time. It's always going to be 6-sided. Sometimes you'll be asked to roll a d3, but that's just a d6 cut in half. Sometimes you might roll a d6, d6, which is 10s and 1s for that kind of thing. And then we have a bit on the setting, but I've already given the gist of it. But then we get into characters. So with character creation, you first assign attribute ranks, then select a lineage, then determine your name, then declare 3 oaths, and pick a class. So attributes rank from 1 to 4. You start with 1 at rank 4, 2 at rank 3, 2 at rank 2, and 1 at rank 1. And the attributes are might, toughness, agility, willpower, intelligence, and fate. And the way that they're set up, that you can definitely see the Warhammer Fantasy DNA in there.
Yep.
Then we have grit points, which is basically hit points in all but name. This is the sum of your resilience and toughness. You also have luck points, which is equal to your ranks in fate. You spend a luck point, you get a +2 bonus on any roll. You can spend a luck point after making a roll, and you can use multiple luck points on a single roll. Spent luck points are lost for the remainder of the session. They're fully restored at the beginning of the next session.
At least it's not like what I've heard about in Dark Heresy, where if you use a fate point to prevent like death or something, that it's permanently lost.
Yeah. Though there are ways to use fate points in a temporary sense to give yourself a bonus. But after that, you pick one of the following lineages: dwarf, firbolg, halfling, high elf, human, or wood elf. And each one has their own benefits. So we have, and I do like that they gave a collection of names for people who need a start. So let's see, for dwarves, you get a +1 bonus to attack and defense rolls. You're proficient with heavy weapons. You have 2 ranks in brewing, masonry, or smithing. You have a -1 penalty to acrobatics checks. And you gain 1 rank in toughness and 4 additional item slots, and you cannot be dazed. Let's see, for halflings, you gain a +1 bonus to ranged attack rolls, a +1 to defense rolls, though a -1 to athletics checks and melee damage rolls. You gain 1 rank in acrobatics and stealth, and 1 rank in fate. So don't be a halfling who's getting into the fray unless you're really, really good at it.
Yeah, no size disadvantage or disadvantage here, it looks like.
See, then we have high elves. You gain 1 rank in intelligence, 2 ranks in academics. You know 2 DV1 spells of your choice. Spellcasting attempts for these spells are always successful, and no magic check is necessary. And then the maximum number of grit points you have is reduced by 1. So about what you'd expect. Good casters, not as good in getting their ass kicked. Then we have humans, which gain versatile, so 1 rank and 4 different skills. And when spending a luck point, you get a +3 bonus to a dice roll instead of +2. And 1 rank in willpower.
So the usual trope of humans having versatility in just about everything.
Mm-hmm. Then we have oaths. Each oath has a boon and a bane, as long as you continue to follow said oath. If you violate an oath, you lose the oath's boon and instead incur its bane. But if you perform a heroic deed tied to the oath, you can redeem yourself. I'd say oaths here are akin to what would be alignment in other games, but not as bullshit.
And actually have some sort of function beyond how a character acts.
Mm-hmm. So, for example, the Oath of Diligence. When tasked with a responsibility, you must strive to complete it as quickly and efficiently as possible. You should embrace hard work and industry while rejecting sloth. Its boon, you roll black dice for masonry, carpentry, and smithing checks, and its bane is you incur a -2 penalty to carpentry, masonry, and smithing checks. I appreciate oath, and again, the thing is, you are declaring 3 oaths, so that's 3 potential boons that you get, but you're also responsible for, which also I'd say gives a bigger variety for characterization.
Mm-hmm.
Again,
because you may not be able to. Yeah, because you may not be able to uphold all 3 of them at once at any given point.
Mm-hmm. Again, alignments without the bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have classes. The available classes are Berserker, Champion, Delver, Knight, Mage, Priest, Scout, Soldier, Spellblade, and Troubadour. And the first one that they show us is Delvers, which I'd say Delver would be the equivalent of Rogue, but it's clearly built around dungeon diving as opposed to being wishy-washy about it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, they get Cunning Strike. You gain a +2 bonus to damage rolls against targets within 5 feet of your allies. So there's your flanking rule. Lucky Break. After you make a defense roll or skill check, you may re-roll the entire dice pool on black dice. You may use this trait a number of times per day equal to your ranks in Fate. Then the skill spread. Let's see, they have light armor proficiency, they're proficient in bows, common weapons, and throwing weapons. Their starting equipment, and their class traits. You begin with 1 class trait and can acquire more through advancement. So there's already a variety of stuff you can get. So instead of having it set what features you get as you level up, it's a case of here's a list. Pick one each time you level up.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have Mage. They get Magic Bolt and Spellcaster right out of the gate. And you can get 1 trait at the start and gain more as you go on. Let's see, then we have Priest, which with Priest you have Anointed and Divine Intervention.
Divine Intervention's pretty standard for most priests.
And Anointed, you have a single Divine Tradition and begin with 4 miracles of your choice in it. I think we'll end up getting more into that when we get into how magic works here. I do appreciate that one of the traits you can get for a priest is Warrior Monk.
Are you trying to tell us something?
Yeah, I'm consistent with my gimmick.
Fair.
Though I could also argue that it's channeling the warrior priest concept in Warhammer Fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
The priests of Sigmar.
Yeah. Or the battle priest from Ragnarok, if you raise them right. I've made one of those. Those are fun.
Mm-hmm. Tabby, are you familiar with the warrior priest archetype in Warhammer?
Not in Warhammer, but I've played plenty of games where there are the warrior priest type, or I personally played a Clarendon, so I'm pretty well acquainted with that kind of archetype.
Oh. Yeah, and I will DM you one image to give the warrior priest of Sigmar.
Whenever
Yeah.
I think warrior priest, I immediately think of the war monk from Fire Emblem Awakening. Yeah, they can heal, but they can also wield a giant axe.
Since I've been playing Growlancer, they have warrior priests as one of the standard enemies in all of the 3 of the armies. And they're annoying because I can't drain their MP, but also because they are the ones that buff the field, and then they can go up and smack you real hard. So, I mean, and then I literally played what we called a Clarendon, which she was literally called the Alara, the Clarendon of the Church of Swole, because that's what Ryan said. But legit big ol' hammer, smacked everything out of her sight, that kind of thing. So
Yep.
I was a life domain cleric though, but I smacked the crap out of everybody because I was like, dude, I don't even care anymore. But I was also paladin.
But then we have the soldier class, which is a lot. I think a lot of people would look at the soldier and think, this is the equivalent of fighter. No, this is the equivalent of warlord.
Mm-hmm.
The archetype, one of the archetypes that scratched an itch people didn't know that they had from the edition I'm supposed to hate, but I don't because the check bounced. And the main reason I say that is the way coordinated movement and tactics work. The Warlord in 4E was meant to be the frontline general. And we kind of have that vibe here. Like, coordinated movement. As an auxiliary action, you can allow an ally within 50 feet of you to move again this turn. The target of this trait can move to 25 feet and does not provoke opportunity attacks. And tactics. As an auxiliary action, you can issue orders to one ally within 50 feet. Your target gains a +1 bonus to attack and defense rolls until the beginning of your next turn.
Sounds like the commander class of Metaphor.
I still haven't played Metaphor, so I'll take your word for it.
Oh, it is really good, but no, there's
you don't
an
need to sell it to
entire.
me. It's just
There's an entire class that's all dedicated to literally like not only defend, but it's like it will the way that they buff their fellows and everything, and they call to action is like one of their like abilities, if I recall correctly, or something. It's something similar to that, and it's an interesting play on it, but they also can kick the crap out of people.
But then we have the way experience is gained. You gain 50 each session if you uphold your oaths. If you violate one of them, you don't get that 50 EXP. If you perform a deed related to one of your oaths, you gain an additional 50. Then adventures will typically award 25 to 100 experience per session. The GM may award more for if an adventure accomplishes something remarkable. And spending it, if you can save experience and spend it between sessions. As far as what you can spend it on, and here. So here's the thing. I kind of mentioned levels. We're not dealing with levels. We're dealing with the XP as currency approach. You can buy skill ranks, can buy a new miracle or spell, or a new trait.
So big potential for lots of customization.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of reminds me like of I don't know, like 90% of the games that you actually play, in like that are tactical in general, and also like Fable and such.
Fuck Peter Molyneux.
Peter Molyneux is a liar, but also a genius.
We'll go tactical RPG. You get skill points. You put skill points in things. There's your experience. Have fun.
But then we have the rules when it comes to skill checks. When resolving a skill check, you roll a number of dice equal to your ranks in the skill plus its attribute. And there are 3 die colors to consider. White die are standard, and you get 1 success on 4s or higher. Red die succeed on 3 or higher, and black die succeed on 2 or higher. Certain items and traits may convert your white dice to red or black. Die pools may also be negatively influenced, so that red or black die are converted to white. Die that results in a 6 are exploding die. So roll an additional die and add it. If you roll another 6, then you keep going, and you keep going until you stop rolling 6s on that. All dice explode. So there is the possibility of getting a big-ass dice pool. If you have a 20-carat horseshoe stuck up your ass. For legal reasons, this is a joke. Do not stick a horseshoe up there. If you do, I take no responsibility.
Okay. Always like whenever the dice tables or dice rolls go into like, oh, you roll a 6, okay, well roll on this one now. Okay, well now roll on this now, and then do this, or explode into more things. Like I like those things because they're fun.
But standard checks have a difficulty value, i.e. how many hits you need. And opposed checks are the winner of that is determined by the success value, i.e. who got more. Opposed checks that result in a draw have no clear resolution, and neither side gets an advantage over the other. So there is no ties go to the attacker or defender kind of thing. If there's a dice modifier mentioned, then you get additional die. Penalties work the same way. You can't go below 1. You can support someone, and that gives them a +1 die bonus to the roll. And then we have our skill list, which a lot of it I'd say is pretty standard fare. But there are quite a few skills, but not as many as some games that have skill lists that I consider offensive. But then we have combat. You do start with initiative, which is a type of leadership check. But it isn't a case of everybody roll initiative individually. One combatant from each side performs an opposed leadership check. Whoever wins gets to choose which side goes first. Once every combatant has acted within their company's turn, the other company begins their turn. So once again, we don't have individual rolls for initiative. We have party-based initiative.
So, player phase, enemy phase.
Mm-hmm. We also have a rule of diminishing defense. Combatants attacked by multiple enemies during the same turn incur a penalty to their defense rolls. Each defense roll performed after the first incurs a cumulative -2 penalty. This allows weaker combatants to overwhelm more competent foes, aka accuracy by volume. And I think it's also nice that combat is a contested action. You're rolling fighting or shooting. The target is rolling defense. and if an attack hits, you roll a number of damage dice based on the weapon. You do get a bonus equal to the success value. But other than that, you're rolling damage is rolled the same way as other die rolls are done in Old Hammer. So each success, 1 damage.
So hit points are at a premium, if I understand right.
I'd say hit points are more like the wounds that we saw with Fang Knight.
Right.
The only difference is everything's D6s here, but one hit on a D6, 1 damage. It does mean that this avoids one problem that I've had with some games, where if you succeed on the attack roll versus defense by a little or by a lot, you end up doing the same amount of damage. I'm not a fan of that. If somebody's attack beats defense by 5 instead of by 1, I think they should not be doing the same amount of damage as the guy who only beat it by 1.
Right.
Of course, armor does play a factor. But armor is not automatic damage reduction. You have to roll armor die, and every success in that reduces rolled damage. But some attacks can ignore armor, and penalties can reduce armor below 1 die. So there's no guarantees in combat, which I like. But you do have one standard action and 1 auxiliary action. And with unarmed attacks, it notes you receive a -2 penalty when targeting armed combatants. But melee weapon attacks performed against armed combatants receive a +2 bonus, which makes sense. You don't try and punch.
Don't bring a knife to a guy fight.
Yeah.
Or don't bring fists to a gunfight.
Mm-hmm.
Don't bring a knife to a gunfight.
If you have a polearm, you can brace. If that polearm has or if it's a weapon that has the repel trait, which is basically an anti-cavalry move. If a mounted enemy enters a braced opponent's reach, they provoke an attack of opportunity, which grants a +2 bonus.
Ooh.
Let's see, with dual wielding, you can carry a weapon in each hand, but you can only attack with one of them in each turn. This does mean that you can switch between weapons easily, because you don't have to deal with the -1 penalty when switching weapons. Or you can benefit from defensive properties of an offhand weapon. Combatants can retain a 2-handed weapon in one hand while attacking with another weapon, or an unarmed attack. So then they have movement, which is operating on the 5x5 grid, though standard movement is 25 feet. So
Jeez,
5
that's
squares.
a long way.
And the standard affair when it comes to obstacles, when it comes to range attacks, opportunity attacks. And this is going to be a fun bit. Opportunity attacks automatically hit their target, and the target incurs a -3 penalty to their armor roll against this damage.
Yow. Well, yeah, you're running. You're not necessarily going to turn to defend.
Mhm. But in order to perform an opportunity attack, you have to be using a melee weapon. Can't use it with ranged. I'd say that's a decent trade-off.
Yeah, because if someone's running by, you're not going to be able to react quick enough to shoot them in the back, per se.
Mhm. That being said, if you are threatened and you perform a shooting or magic action, you provoke opportunity attacks. See, then we have AoE, which, if you've seen grid combat, you've seen these before. Then the damage types, and if you have damage resistance, it's just a straight -3 penalty to damage rolls. If you have vulnerability, it's +3 damage. Though, given I haven't seen otherwise, so I am operating under the assumption that damage dice can explode. Which,
Goodness.
and also armor can explode.
Yeah.
Now, if it is the case where those kind of die don't, that's fine. If it's a case where damage and armor don't explode, I'm going to find a way to make them explode by house ruling it, because that adds more chaos and more salt.
Yep.
Then subduing, suffocation, death, and injury. If you're reduced to 0 grit, then you have to roll on the critical injury chart to see what injury occurs. You can keep moving and acting, but every time you take damage after that, you have to roll on the injury chart again. You can spend a luck point to re-roll on the chart, and NPCs immediately die when they're reduced to 0 grit points. But if you roll in the critical injury chart and suffer the same injury twice, you die.
No.
Oh, wow.
I stubbed my toe and broke it twice. I am dead now. I know stubbing your toe is not a critical injury, but you know.
Although what would be even really nasty is if you roll 11 or 13 on this, then you have to roll twice.
Wow.
Getting the same injury twice on top of rolling multiple injuries.
I just rolled death twice. It's fine.
See, you do have morale.
Sig knows my rolls. He knows my luck.
Am I dealing with another person who is the target of the Wrath of the Dice Gods?
I'll neither confirm nor deny this.
How many times have I switched my dice because I'm like, maybe, just maybe this time I can get something better than a 5.
I plead the 5th.
I'm not blessing your dice.
I finally got my dice to cooperate with me last one whenever I turned them into like metallic looking dice. Apparently, now the dice gods are pleased because they're gold.
For now. But
yes, for now.
And Mildred just jinxed it.
Oh, come on. It was going to happen eventually. And interesting. Given how RNGesus loves screwing with us, I would not be surprised if an enemy will roll a bunch of 6s. You said it, not me.
RNGesus is unforgiving.
The dice gods show no mercy. Amen.
I pray daily to RNGesus. Hallowed be its name. Amen.
But then we have the different conditions, both positive and negative. Then equipment. The equipment is going to be standard, though I do like the availability rule we have here. Characters attempting to purchase an uncommon item must make a fortune check with a DV equal to the item's rarity. On a failure, the item is not available for purchase. Only one fortune check may be made per item type, no matter how many characters search for it.
So nobody can search for the same thing and know, oh, hey, here it is. Here, I'll give you this weapon.
Yep. Once again, we have... Go ahead.
It kind of looks like with that, it looks like that if only one is being made per item type, if one person finds it, then they can be like, oh, well, here it is, and tell the other people who are looking for it. Unless I'm wrong in reading that.
That can happen. But then we have item slots, which is based on your might score times 4. Then we have the way weapons are going to work. A good amount of weapons are going to have armor penetration. When it comes to damage, some of them are based on one of your stats. For example, a war sword does might plus 2 damage. And some of the traits within weapons. Brutal would be an interesting trait. It means you're going to be rolling red die with this weapon. That, of course, means any die that's a 3 and up is a hit.
Yep.
And unless I hear otherwise, I'm assuming damage dice explode.
Hehe.
But see, then we have the different types of weapons. The idea of an axe as a dueling weapon I find amusing.
I mean, don't you usually duel with your axes? I thought it was a standard thing. According to Growlancer, it is at least.
Let me ask you a question. Let me see.
No.
So I think what's intended to be a long axe is a Dane axe.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, all right, fine. I can see that being a dueling weapon. But then we have heavy weapons. I do appreciate that they have one simply called Grudge Maul. I feel like that's a weapon that should be used only by dwarves. But then we have ammunition, as well as armor, and armor has a armor value. We've covered how that works. And of course, the heaviest armor is dwarven armor, as God intended. And
like I said, gotta represent the short kings.
Yep. And since dwarven armor is reinforced, that means you perform armor rolls on red dice. But you also take a penalty to acrobatics checks and defense rolls. So you're shit at dodging, but if you roll well enough, you don't need to. Especially since dwarven armor has an AV of 10.
Mm-hmm.
It takes 8 slots, so you better have a high might, but you may not need... And then healing supplies, which is self-explanatory, and the miscellaneous affairs. Then we get to magic. So spells have their difficulty listed. If you meet or succeed that with your magic check, you successfully cast. Then the way duration works, the way range works, which is self-explanatory. Then spell save. This is the skill you use to try and dodge a spell. Then arcane stress. Each time you roll a 1 while making a magic check, you incur 1 point of arcane stress. Only magic checks related to spellcasting can cause this. Exploding dice cannot cause arcane stress. You have a stress threshold equal to your ranks in willpower plus your ranks in magic. If this stress exceeds that threshold, you cannot cast spells anymore. You lose all of that after a full 8 hours of rest. You can choose to roll fewer dice than your maximum allowance for a magic check to avoid accumulating arcane stress. So this is your equivalent of MP. You essentially can cast spells until you get tired. I would probably house rule it that you can accumulate stress above the threshold, but every 1 that you roll after that, you're taking a point in grit points.
Mm-hmm.
You know the whole you can keep pushing it, but you are running the risk of harming yourself.
I mean, like push rolls in Call of Cthulhu.
Or push rolls in the Year Zero engine.
Mhm.
You can try again at that failed roll, but if you fail it again, it's even worse.
Yep.
But you do need to record your spells on a grimoire. If you lose it, you have a -2 penalty to your magic checks. You can learn spells from grimoires you get by making a DV3 academics check for each spell contained. On a success, you learn the spell without the need to spend XP, and you record it in your grimoire.
Like this versus every other OSR game, to learn spells, you have to spend a certain amount of time studying the spell, as well as the equivalent amount of gold for it.
Mm-hmm. Again, that's that simulation brain rot.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with spellcasting and armor, if you're wearing medium or heavy armor, you have a penalty to magic checks equal to the armor's armor value. Meaning, if you're wearing dwarven armor, you're probably not casting any spells. Because remember that dwarven armor has an AV of 10. But all spells derive from the following traditions: Elemental, Illusionist, Imperial, Infernal, Runic, and Stygian. Though you can also incur additional arcane stress by putting enhancements on spells. But they also increase the difficulty. So that's your trade-off with metamagic. Well, some of them increase the difficulty, other ones just inflict stress. But some of them don't inflict stress. Like controlled spell, you take 1 arcane stress, but you can re-roll a number of dice for the magic check equal to your willpower. Whereas safe spell, you increase the difficulty by 3, but the magic check cannot cause arcane stress. And see, then we have some of the traditions. First with elemental magic, which is self-explanatory. I do like that some of the weather effects are also in it. Even if they're ritual spells and thus would take an hour to cast. Like, say, control weather. But then we have miracles, which function like spells, but with a few exceptions. They do not cause arcane stress, and they do not need to be recorded. So you don't need a grimoire for them. But instead, the first magic check performed during the day for miracles has a DV of 1. This increases by 1 for every additional miracle cast in the same day. When you fail a magic check, you cannot perform miracles for the remainder of the day.
So each of the magical traditions has some kind of quirk to them.
Now, it looks like they aren't giving the other magical traditions just elemental. For miracles, which is what you're going to be doing as a priest, it's a game of chicken.
Yep.
But we have 3 different types of traditions. Druidic magic, which means you can be a priest and a druid, essentially. Profane magic. I don't think I need to explain what profane is. And sanctified magic, which is self-explanatory. And then we have a few examples of them. And finally, the bestiary. It is noted that in order to identify a monster for the first time, you'd have to roll a DV3 academics or folklore check. And we do have a few sample examples in the bestiary. It also notes if you're rolling red die or black die for some of their stats. Which is very nice. Now I'm skimming through the bestiary for obvious reasons. And then right at the back we have a character sheet. So I liked Oathhammer when I liked Oathhammer and its predecessor Streets of Peril, and I think you can see why this game got my seal of approval. At least from this particular playtest. Well, it's technically a quick start, but you get the point.
Yeah.
So, what did you two think of Wandering Blades and Oathhammer?
Wandering Blades, I feel like needs a bit of work, maybe some mechanical changes. Try to focus on the aesthetic versus, trying to do like the nitty-gritty of it. Whereas Oathhammer, very simplistic, a lot of different ideas from the usual OSR stuff.
Yeah. I think that the Wandering Blades, it has a good idea, but it does need to be refined. It's got some things where it kind of feels like it's trying too hard to do something, and I can't put my finger on it really, but it's like it's trying too hard. And it didn't look like it was going to be like what I would be looking for in a game so much. It had some fun, cool things, but not a lot that I was really like interested in. Because it just kind of, I can't put my finger on where it fell flat, but it fell flat somewhere. And then with Oathhammer, it was very simple, straight to the point. Like, I didn't have to go in and reread something like 4 times and be like, oh, no, I read it once and I'm like, oh, I get it. Let's go on to the next thing. I get it. Let's go on. It was very straightforward. It seems like it would be very fun to just like pick up and go, and like you can just do a lot of things. Especially like making it so that it's just very customizable and just more. It's not cookie cutter. And also, having more classes is always good, because I know with like the Wandering Blades, there was 2 classes. It said there were 3. There was 2, and and the classes were kind of like, okay, well, I'm just looking at 2 variations of the same class. That's the other thing I wasn't okay with.
Looking at the itch page, the 3rd class with Wandering Blades is supposed to be the Scholar. And I realize that the game is in development when it comes to Wandering Blades, but the attitude that I have with it is trying a bit too hard. I think it's trying a bit too hard at being an OSR game and not at being a wuxia game. And the core principles that it talks about, I'm not entirely sure if it meets those goals the way that it may think it does. For example, one of them about combat feeling stylish, fast, and compelling. I didn't really see that.
Yeah, that was something I got too. Was like, you don't have to say that. You don't have to like write that it has to be stylish and fast and compelling. It's like, it should just be that. And if you have to kind of spell it out, it probably isn't that.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
And the other thing, strategy over luck, I didn't get that vibe at all.
You're using dice. It's going to be luck based no matter what you try. Like, you can try to strategize. You can really do everything you can and do the whole thing of oh, okay, well, if I have a 97% chance of winning, well, you still have a 32% chance of losing. It's all going to come down to the dice rolls anyway. So,
you see, they say all men are created equal. No, I'm not doing Steiner math. But there are ways to introduce more strategic and more tactical elements. I've seen it done in plenty of games. Hell, I've done it with my own. The problem is I don't see where that strategic decision making really comes in, especially when Ki was so limiting of a resource. I know that it's gotten a bunch of high praise from a bunch of folk, but when I compare it to, and if it weren't for the fact that the idea of a wuxia TTRPG is not by any stretch of the imagination a novel concept in the year of our Lord 2025 as we record this, I have covered several wuxia RPGs on this channel. And I think a lot of the ones that I have covered have a stronger grasp of that identity. Hell, even when it comes to doing old school stuff like not Wandering Blades, it was the successor to Dragon Fist. I'll have to double check later, but the idea of old school meets wuxia is not even new. That kind of thing has been around for quite a while. Flying Swordsman was the name of it. There was also the Scarlet Heroes game by Sine Nomine, i.e. Kevin Crawford. Kevin Crawford is an absolute genius and a madman. But you remember what I talked about with Diablo 4, how the fact that it had so much competition meant that it had to meet a high baseline?
Yep.
I'm kind of getting that vibe here, and I feel like I'm getting in the same position here that I was with Fabula Ultima, where a lot of people who haven't played a lot of wuxia games who are new to the concept are going to sing high praises about this, but people who have a few more under their belt are going to be a little less so. Now, I contrast this with Oathhammer, which again is very to the point, and it has a very clear voice in terms of its mechanics. And it's hard to explain what exactly I mean when I talk about a voice in this kind of context. I think it's in this case the fact that it isn't trying to be this nebulous version of old school. It's the only thing it's trying to be is Oathhammer.
Yep.
Yeah, I can see that. It's just it doesn't it's like it has nothing to prove to anybody but itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't even try to prove it to itself. It's just I'm a game and I want to be fun.
Which I think is the better approach, if I'm being honest.
And that's not something you see a lot, especially in spaces like the OSR, which is just usually more of the same, just a variation on that formula, you know?
And yet somehow I'm in the wrong by calling them a ivory tower.
More like a glass house.
Given how some people in that crowd are about being challenged, or about talking about games in a way beyond inane talking points. But with that said, that is going to do it for this particular episode. We will be back here next week for Farsight. That is going to be the next major season we're going into. Now, this is a game that I did back when its Kickstarter ran, and I have interviewed its developers. It was a tricky affair because they're from Italy and I'm not. But it's not the first or last time that I've had to make that kind of thing work. I will note that somebody got a bit cheeky and homebrewed a Vogon race for the game.
Oh wow!
Including giving rules for Vogon poetry. Which, if you've read Hitchhikers or seen the movie, you know that is pain.
Mm-hmm. It's been a while, but yeah, I remember something about it.
Mm-hmm. But that should be a very fun experience, especially for somebody like me who is a massive fan of Star Wars Saga Edition. And you'll see what I mean by that very, very soon. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
无自义，我不自明，不破丧。